and thank you for joining us again on the Three Questions podcast. This is Paul Saunders, president of the Center for the National Interest. Really excited today to have another one of my colleagues, this time Jacob Heilbrunn, who's the editor of the Center's online magazine, The National Interest, and a very thoughtful observer of American politics and foreign policy. Jacob, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad to join your trifecta.
My trifecta. Absolutely. So let's talk today about the president's tariffs. Let's have another trifecta. Tariffs, taxes, and oh gosh, I don't know what the other T is. Let's talk about tariffs and taxes.
Great subjects.
Absolutely. So the president, as we speak, is sending out letters to heads of state around the planet, kind of setting a new deadline for tariff negotiations. I wonder, what do you think the president is trying to accomplish here? Is he trying to achieve, a policy objective like pulling in money to the U.S. Treasury or reshoring manufacturing? Is he trying to achieve a political objective, just sort of demonstrating that he's a winner, or for that matter, just demonstrating that he's a fighter? What's he after?
I don't think any of those preclude each other. The dominant strain in Donald Trump's foreign policy ever since he ran an ad in the New York Times, I believe in 1986, saying that Japan and Germany were ripping off the United States in international trade, has been that the U.S. is a sucker, as he likes to put it, that is being exploited, and that its allies are nothing of the kind. And that instead the United States has set up a trading system after World War II that does not operate to its advantage, but to its detriment. And that he, Donald Trump, knows better than the foreign policy establishment that has essentially dominated American foreign policy since 1945. Now, the positive case obviously is that we've had an unprecedented era of stability and increasing wealth in the United States since 1945, that we have maintained these relationships both in Europe and in Asia that have redounded to the benefit of both sides. Donald Trump takes a different view. He thinks it's a zero-sum game. He wants the United States essentially to be at the center of the trading system, with other countries coming to it as supplicants. And he constantly says that he is essentially the owner of a large shopping center called the United States, and that others are going to have to pay for the privilege of selling their wares in the United States. And so there are multiple objectives here. First of all, he gets to be the dominant guy calling the shots. He gets to play off countries against each other. He gets to build up American industry, and he gets to collect what he sees as unprecedented revenues in the form of tariffs for the U.S. Treasury. Now, he alleges that those revenues are not coming from from American citizens, and that it's foreigners who are going to pay this. The logic of this has not only eluded my humble self, but also the best economists in the United States and abroad. Because in fact, simple math tells you that it's going to be American companies who are going to pass on that tariff to American consumers, and already are. There's an article today in The Guardian about how Americans are saying that the cost of basic necessities is already rising. And you can see it in the supermarket as well. Now, Donald Trump, is saying he's backed off before, because we can get into the whole issue. I don't want to throw too much in here, but we get into the issue of the creditworthiness of the United States, the sale of U.S. treasuries, and the federal deficit, which is at $36 trillion, And finally, the big whopper of a question, which is, can the United States economy flourish as Trump promises with the imposition of these tariffs? Or if you're a free trader like me and someone who believes pretty much in capitalism and the free market, the infliction of these tariffs on the American consumer.
Let's come back to all of that in a little bit more depth in a minute. But for now, let's focus on the deadline. So the president had his so-called Liberation Day, on April 2nd, when he first announced a lot of these tariffs, most of the tariffs. He set a deadline. He extended the deadline. There's kind of a second track with China, where we have sort of moving deadlines. At least some on Wall Street have gone with this taco Trump nickname. Trump always chickens out because they felt like he was backing down and extending the deadlines. Do you think the deadline is for real this time? And if it is for real, that means he just lets these tariffs go into effect, with 100 plus countries around the world?
Trump has always been pretty cautious in foreign affairs, including with his bombing of Iran, which was more of a ceremonial shot than actually getting mired in an all-out conflict in the Middle East. He's repeatedly been cautious. However, the taco line has gotten under his skin, which is Trump always chickens out. And I think he's a little more nervous about showing weakness. And he does believe in the efficacy of these tariffs. So he's saying that he's going to impose also 50% on copper-based goods by August 1st, pharmaceutical products as high as 200%, though he's saying that he would give more time on that. But yeah, I think the likelihood that Trump really does go for the tariffs on August 1st is pretty high. And I think the consequences of that would be maybe not immediately, but would be definitely be deleterious for the American economy, because they do amount to a kind of value-added tax, and they could crimp economic growth.
So let's kind of get into that in a little bit greater depth here as the final question of my three questions this time. So Trump is pursuing this tariff negotiation, with 190 countries at the same time. He just had, I think in fairness, a pretty significant political victory domestically, getting his one big beautiful bill to pass in the House and in the Senate. You brought up briefly earlier in the conversation the issue of, U.S. Treasuries. He has made very clear that he wants to have a different Fed chairman and, to try to have lower interest rates. He's kind of trying to do all of these things at the same time. From a certain perspective, it's kind of a grand economic social science experiment. What do you think we're going to see over the course of the next year as all of this stuff unfolds? And what kind of political consequences might flow from that if Trump succeeds and there's money kind of flowing in to U.S. customs, and the economy is booming because trickle-down economics is working, and he's driven interest rates lower, and the debt is cheaper, and what an amazing place to live. Or conversely, there's kind of another narrative where, which you alluded to, where prices are going up because of the tariffs. People are maybe kind of starting to suffer in some respects from some of the cuts in the one big beautiful bill. maybe things don't go quite the way that he wants on the treasury market. Which way do you think that's going to go? What do you think might happen? What are we looking at in the midterms?
My greatest fear is that we see a rerun of 1929, which is that we have enjoyed a pretty long economic boom and that the guardrails are now coming off. Foreigners are becoming increasingly skeptical about financing America's debt, which currently stands at 36 trillion. Trump has larded on another 3 to 5 trillion in the form of the big, beautiful bill. And we are spending money that we do not possess. The cuts that have been imposed are minuscule compared to the outlays of the federal government and our refusal to tax in proportion to what we're spending. I experienced the 1970s when we had stagflation, and that was the result of excess spending in the Vietnam War. And that could look like like a picnic compared to what's coming, especially if you drive down the interest rates. If you replace the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell with a Trump lackey who reduces interest rates, I believe Trump is calling for going to 0%. The economy would go into a sugar high, but the amount of money that would be injected into it would fuel inflation that would eclipse what we experienced under Biden. During the Jimmy Carter era in the 1970s, we ended up with inflation, I believe, close to 10%, and interest rates under Paul Volcker ended up being hiked to around 19 or 20%. And this time we'd be in trouble because we didn't have the kind of federal deficit then that we do now. So are we headed towards like a Greece scenario where we default on our debt? Or are we actually headed towards 1929, which was the end really of the Gilded Age? And we do see, with the rise of the billionaire class that we have now, Trump's willingness to remove scrutiny of white collar crime, all of these things occurred during the 1920s and the reforms that you had, the creation of the Securities and Exchange Commission under Franklin Roosevelt, which was headed by Joe Kennedy, himself a former stock speculator. And Roosevelt said he was appointing him precisely because he had been a crook. He would be able to, regulate the economy. My worry is that, we've forgotten a lot of the lessons of the past, and this could all lurch completely out of control.
Jacob, thank you very much for three provocative answers to my three questions. Thanks for joining me today. Again, to our listeners, this is Paul Saunders with the Center for the National Interest and the Three Questions podcast with my colleague Jacob Heilbrunn, the editor of the National Interest. Thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you, Paul.